To the HBRIC verbal update on page 41. Pardon me?
You've just voted on an amendment.
No, we haven't. Order in the gallery, please. Okay, gentlemen, welcome.
We're still here.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought we were already here, but just before handing over to Andrew to speak to the update, I just thought it's quite remarkable that in the last conversation, not a single councillor managed to refer to Plan Change 6. It's actually Plan Change 6 that raises the minimum flows of the river, does a whole lot of things. The RWSS was never...
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you make it clear to those people that we're voting on a motion, not an amendment? Okay, thank you.
So it's Plan Change 6 that increases the minimum flows. It was never going to be the RWSS that was going to increase the minimum flows. As many of you will recall from the comparison that's been presented to you a number of times, Plan Change 6 without the RWSS is economically rather difficult for a lot of people because the minimum flows, the increased minimum flows, will very substantially, without the RWSS, very substantially affect.
Yeah, I was about to get there, but I was also going to invite Director... Well, there's a seat up the front, Sam.
So, I'll conclude there since people
Yeah,
don't seem
I
to
think
want
you
to hear
should
this
conclude
message.
there. I think you should
So,
conclude.
over to Andrew.
Well, it's not your message, that's the point. Okay.
All right, just I'll whip through the report, but I am going to just take a wee bit of editorial licence and note that one process the RWSS is running around water contracting is clearly converting effectively what is consented groundwater to stored water, and that will have an environmental impact through improved flows. So I don't think we should forget that either. But anyway.
Well, we've dealt with the last item, let's get on with this one.
So look, the one thing I haven't included in this report, obviously, which is of relevance, is the Dockland Exchange and the High Court decision. And simply to say that from our perspective, that decision's a robust and useful decision, and it's balanced. And it takes that whole issue considerably further forward. So we're happy with that. Just moving on to investor process, pretty brief comment here, but the main point is that we've been in detailed negotiations with two institutional investors as well as Crown Irrigation Investments Limited, and we're all but on the point of a preferred investor. So that's moving along pretty fast. That's the subject of much more a PE paper shortly. And probably for the council's benefit, as soon as we're at that point, then I think that's the time at which Deloitte's, you're in a position to have Deloitte's review the financial model and all the associated matters. Okay.
So we're talking days or weeks for Deloitte's?
Well, I don't know how long. I haven't contracted Deloitte, so I'm not sure how long Deloitte's going to take for their piece of work. But what I am saying...
No, sorry, yeah. I'll rephrase it, the start of that work.
We're, well, subject to a couple of developments in the next few days. I'll be able to answer that precisely very shortly. But I'm not going to commit to saying absolutely when it is, because I've still got a bit of process to do. But it's imminent. Okay. Water uptake. I'm just going to be really blunt here. We are not progressing the water uptake work stream actively until such time as we've got the preferred investor confirmed in an exclusivity agreement. There's a very clear reason for that. That framework enables us to assess what if there are any impacts on the water use agreement, and in turn also it actually will provide a fairly good benchmark for water users in terms of their confidence that the scheme can progress. So I have deliberately held that process back.
Are you happy to take questions?
Yep. No, I just want to finish. Thanks. Deliberately, and I've said it on a number of occasions, but I do anticipate that process will be cranking up from probably about midway through next week. Okay, I'll take a question then.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is, you haven't actually stated for the second month in a row what the actual contracted amount is? Is it still sitting at 31 mil, or is it more?
Yes, it is, because we have a significant number of approaches for additional water,
Yeah.
but we're not contracting that water until such time as we've confirmed the preferred investor.
Okay, because I do note in page 4 of the supplementary report that you have expended $9,300 for landowner negotiations and
Yep.
$25,900 for water contract sales. So that's like $34,000 of
So-
expenditure in the
so
last
to
month.
clarify that-
If I can just finish, it doesn't sound like it's on hold to me.
Okay.
And that's the second month in a row that you've told us the same thing
Yeah.
with the same amount of expenditure.
And I'm happy to clarify exactly what that entails. So the landowner, $9,000 associated with landowner negotiations are land acquisition negotiations, right? So that's land around the
For the
reservoir
dam, yeah.
and also in the head race. So that's land acquisition, not water users.
Yep.
The second point is that I have Duncan McLeod as an employment contract, so Duncan's still part of the team, and we pay from month by month. I don't pay for the balance of the sales workforce until such time as they're engaged. But a significant amount of that expenditure, at around about $15,000 to $16,000 of that expenditure, is actually on detailed technical work associated with water application rates and flow rates in the secondary distribution network, which is a service level standard that we've been working through and resolving as part of the final contracting process. So my statement is absolutely consistent. I have not had the full sales workforce engaged in water user agreement negotiations. Okay. All right. So other work strands progressed in the last few weeks. Again, this first item is associated with the investor framework. It's technical due diligence. It's a major piece of work, which ultimately both the institutional investors, Crown Irrigation Investments, and senior lenders review, and that covers issues such as, for example, hydrology, operations and maintenance contracts, the construction contract and its risk allocation, all those sorts of issues. So that's been a major piece of work, and that's pretty well ready to go for those parties. Second area we've been working on, which is sort of starting to fill in the detail around how the scheme will actually operate, is what we call operation and maintenance contracts through the construction and operating periods. The construction period's clearly the period when the dam build commences to the point of first water delivery, and thereafter in the operating period. And again, those contracts effectively will deal with issues such as environmental compliance, environmental monitoring and reporting, water contracting, as well as, for example, moving water around the distribution network and system, and hydrological forecasting. So that's a very light touch over there. Consents, moving on to consents. In terms of consents, there are a number of consents that are yet to be applied for, but we did apply for consents to insert the macroinvertebrate monitoring conditions, MCI, for the scheme, which we signalled we were going to do quite some time ago. That's an additional level of environmental compliance monitoring and reporting that we've effectively done. And in addition to that, we have applied for consents, which are production land use consents for expanded zones around the existing 5 zones. That's in essence effectively saying there are potential customers in those zones, and they're going to need consents, and it's whether the scheme applies for those consents or they do, and that falls under Plan Change 6. So those matters have been dealt with.
Thank you. Councillor Balfour.
What is the actual physical impact of that consent that you applied for to increase the notice that we were given of this is a phrase, use of water and production land as part of the Ruatanifa water storage scheme within additional areas. That was the sum total description we got of a resource consent you applied for just before Christmas that was granted without any public notification. So I'd like to know what exactly the scope of that is. What is the impact on the footprint of this consent?
Are you
The word
asking-
on the street is that it adds 25,000 hectares.
Are you asking for an approximate number for the amount, for the extra amount of land?
Yes.
You know that, Andrew?
It might be in the order of it might be in the order of 20,000 hectares, but I'd note this: we already hold production land use consents for 58,000 hectares. So the key point there is there are farming properties that may take water in that additional area, but there's no way that we're going to add 25,000 hectares of irrigation on top of the existing consents. Actually, we're adding in effect. I couldn't actually say the number off the top of my head, but it's simply moving water into properties that actually are adjacent on the boundaries of the existing zones.
So when most of the public presentation of this scheme is that it is going to have a serviceable area of 25,000 or so hectares, how would you put that sentence today? This scheme will have a serviceable area of...
reinforce that the scheme is still going to serve in the order of 25 to 28,000 hectares of irrigated land. It's just simply an issue of where that water goes.
But it may be over a bigger...
It will be over a bigger area.
Over a bigger total area, that's all.
That's right.
Okay,
So less concentrated, if you like. You could have 25,000 hectares completely wall to wall, or you can have 25,000 hectares in 50,000, where only half of it's irrigated.
Which then is the follow-up. Later in your report, you're talking about the D&C business here. You've been struggling, as you've explained to us, with costing out what the full distribution scheme would look like and how much it would cost. If you now have physically doubled the area that is potentially serviceable, wouldn't that have an impact on the distribution scheme and the cost of doing that?
So as we've explained to councillors, both in several previous meetings, we are, if you like, reorganising the distribution system so that those people who wish to buy water, kind of not quite irrespective of where they are, but over a larger area than was originally applied for consents, that we will be able to serve them. And yes, you're quite right, this does have an impact on the design and the cost of the distribution system. And you've been briefed about this, at least in the August, September, October and November meetings.
Can I just ask a supplementary question? So you said just before that that if you like, the command area that you're now targeting has been increased by approximately another 25,000 hectares. So it's gone from what to what?
What if you,
and how many farmers have you gone from?
If the number 25,000 hectares is correct, and I'd actually want to have a look at that myself because I'm not convinced it is, but the first point is that there is existing consents covering 58,000 hectares, right? So if it's 25,000 hectares or it's 15,000 hectares, that's on top of the 58,000 hectares, okay, that are consented. Okay.
And the target number of farmers that you now have in your pool?
Oh well, if you looked at the water uptake numbers that we went through, and we've done on a number of occasions, we've got 438 farming properties over 20 hectares in our FMI database. And that that expanded zone covers a significant number of those properties, with the exception of Mangatarata Hautuma, which is a different issue.
So you're telling me that hasn't increased the number from 438?
No.
Okay.
Councillor Barker.
It's just we start off with a value of 40 million cubic metres as being sort of the metaphor for what the dam needed to get, to make its all the underlying equations of it to get to a cash flow thing. So what is using that same metric, billions of cubic metres, what is the figure that you've got in mind at present given the current circumstances?
The answer is no different from the last time you or anybody else asked this question. It's a slightly variable number, somewhere north of 40 and undoubtedly less than 45, and it will depend entirely, the precise number, on the mix of deep groundwater and new water consents. That is the answer I've given you before. It is the answer I will continue to give you.
Well, that's right. I'm just happy to keep checking. You might change your mind, and you might be a bit more forthcoming. I look forward to the day. But the second thing is that I noticed in one of the previous discussions you had with us, you were talking about making refinements to the scheme. One of them was, I was intrigued by, reducing the diameter of the pipes that were being used, because you had the original design was that people would be able to take the water anytime, anywhere, and that so you had the pipes which were filling that, and you were then reducing that. Presumably, you've undertaken that. But I'm intrigued to know whether there are other things which the scheme has been doing to refine its cost structure, and how much progress you've been making on this. Not just that specifically, but what other things are being done to refine the scheme?
Yeah, sure, I'm happy to answer that. But I'll deal with your pipe size question first. So essentially what, to try and keep this very simple, what we look to do when we're distributing water is
Sure.
distribute on what we call a flow rate
Yep.
and an application rate, and that's mils per hectare per day. And the scheme standard is designed to at 4.2 millimetres per hectare per day, and a flow rate of whatever. I won't go to the flow rate because we're sort of getting out. I need my irrigation guys beside me to be precise around that. Now, what that number does for a pastoral irrigation system on different soil types and different climatic zones is provides a level of irrigation flow rate and application rate water which meets a productivity standard in essence, right? So what we've done is said, well, okay, over the entire distribution network for the scheme, is that the right standard to set? That's one question we've asked, because if you, in very simple terms, if you take water west of Highway 50, if you can sort of visualise Highway 50 and you take it west, you're into generally pasture irrigation, and that pasture irrigation is what many people would have said historically is in summer safe country. In other words, it's a bit wetter, the soils are heavier, and the question is, do you need a flow rate and application rate of the same scale as 4.2 mils? That's the sort of question we've been looking at and addressing. Where we've ended up is we've actually said, well, actually, right now, we'll maintain that standard across the entire distribution network. But if there's a sensible financial optimisation, because it's not necessarily the most efficient use of capital, if it's a sensible financial optimisation, as we go through detailed design with the constructor, then we may well change that in agreement with the customer. So that's the sort of stuff we've been doing. In addition to that, around what we call the primary distribution network, so if you think about that, if you could visualise it, there's the dam, there's a river release water's picked up in at 2 points in the Ruataniwha Basin. One point where it picks up, it's dropped into a head race or a canal. Then it goes into a very large scale pipe. That's primary distribution. When it's going north to Tika, it goes straight into a pipe, pumped into a pipe system, but it's major scale infrastructure. What we are looking to do is optimise the river intakes, and those locations are shifting around, and they're based on a detailed assessment by the constructor and ourselves as to what's the most efficient place to take water and what's the cheapest cost of capital to do it. Okay, so that's the sort of stuff that we've been working on, and that really leads to, for example, in a primary distribution network, we've got consents for offtake here or here in the river system, and we need to reconsent. If we've moved the offtake, we simply need to reconsent that. And in addition, if we're realigning the head race, because we've actually realigned the head race in the detailed design from what was the designation process, then that's a consenting process or a designation process we need to go through with Central Hawke's Bay District Council. So that's, this whole thing is iterating and refining in detail as the planning gets more precise. That's sort of broadly how we're doing it. Okay?
There's one thing I would add to that. You'll recall when we talked to you about the design and construction contract that the first half approximately of the secondary distribution network, that is the different pipe sizes, is locked down in the contract. But the second half is on what's called a measure and value basis. There will obviously be the opportunity to refine pipe sizes to suit the actual distribution as it gets laid out, and that will also have the benefit of experience from the first half of the operators as to exactly what application rates are needed in different parts, because the first half of the users are not completely uniformly, but they're spread over most of the soil types and most of the rainfall climates. So there will be another round of iteration when the second half of the distribution system is built.
The other question is that we have, when we started this debate, the discussion, quite some long time ago, the price of water was set at 23 cents a cubic metre and was to be inflation indexed. Now, by my calculation, we're approximately 2 years behind where we thought we would be on construction. So there's 2 years of inflation, 2 years. So what I'm interested in is when do you anticipate the 23 cents a cubic metre to move, and to what is going to be the new price you would estimate it to be at?
Well, I guess, Councillor Barker, I'm not going to comment on that because that's a matter between us and our customers, actually. But we will be obviously, and we've... Sorry, you're not a customer yet because you actually haven't agreed to take the water. So if and when you do, Rex, come up, I'll have a chat.
We're blind customers, are we?
You've just been frantically trying to avoid being a customer for some of you, so I just don't think we're going to have a price discussion yet.
Well, that makes me even more nervous now.
No,
You've got a price increase in the book when you won't tell me.
So anyway, that's a negotiation we'll have if and when you get to being a customer, having a serious conversation. But what we have done is clearly we've been through what we call a value engineering process with the constructor. That takes into account the refinements that I've just described in the distribution network. It takes into account 2 years of potential inflation or exchange rate movements, and it's a negotiation. And believe you me, we've been through a major value engineering exercise and we know exactly where we're at with those issues. But the key point is that that's a conversation with our customers.
When do you expect to have that conversation? Sometime surely?
Well, we've been having that conversation with a number of them already, actually.
Soon is the correct answer.
Soon.
Councillor Balfour.
Isn't the implication of that the current water user agreements, the 31 million that is signed, are still then contingent on you arriving at a final price?
There's a number of changes to the water user agreement, including nutrient management and a whole lot of things that make them all have to be re-signed, even if there isn't a change in the price.
Councillor Bevan.
I just want to go back to the land area numbers again. You talked about 25,000, you talked about 28,000 hectares, and the total amount of water available is about 100 million cubic metres? Yeah, okay, so what we're talking about is give or take 4,000 cubic metres of water per hectare. If I own an orchard, I'm going to use 1,200. So if all of that land was orchard or grape land, we'd need like 100, well, not quite 100,000 hectares, but maybe 80,000. As I understand it, dairy farms use about 4,000 per hectare. So if we're only targeting 25 to 28 to sell our 100, it sounds to me like it's all dairy. Now, I haven't seen any land use numbers for quite some time. So can you explain what the mix is and why you only need 25,000 hectares?
No, well, actually, it's on the current, Councillor Bevan, on the current forecast of the current contracted land uses and water demand, we're forecasting 28,000 hectares on that mix because we're taking what we know in our detailed contractual pipeline, and that's throwing out a millimetres per hectare per day scenario. And as has been consistent, it was always going to be, the Ruataniwha was never ever going to be all dairy, ever, because it's not suited to it, it's not economically efficient. It was never going to be all pasture. It's a mixture. It's a mixed red meat arable. It's exactly as you expect. There's some dairy with existing dairy operations, dare I say it, so we're not seeing a lot of new entrants. And we do expect, actually interesting though, to be fair, we will expect to see an uplift in the horticultural mix in the land use from where McFarlane sat in 2012. So those numbers, yeah, absolutely, those numbers ultimately, in terms of the application or contracted rates, determine what area we need to cover. But there's a key point in the water user agreement that says if you're contracting at a rate under, I think it's about 2.5 mils per day, per hectare per day, then there's a cost to that, right? because that says that we're building infrastructure for a very low level, and there's a marginal cost to that. So our contracting rate around the infrastructure adjusts for anything that's keeps the standard price for anything that's 2.5 to above.
Yes, I wasn't...
Coming up to the helicopter level, which I think is what your question is really aimed at,
Yep.
the analysis we did some time ago showed that there's substantially more land that would like to be irrigated, if you like, than can be irrigated.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, kind of irrespective of what the mix is. And this is clearly a very important factor in the due diligence for the investors, because they certainly want to know that the market is going to be constrained more by water than it is by land availability to be irrigated.
Yeah, but I was just trying to get an understanding of what the land use mix is, and you've sort of covered that to some degree. Can I make an assumption then that the use for red meat is very similar to dairy, around 4,000 a hectare?
Oh, so if it's pure red meat, yeah, if it's a pure finishing scenario, it is. But far more common is a combination of finishing and arable. So it's a mixed. It's vastly more farmers in that circumstance are a mixed scenario.
The other thing that you need to take into account is that when you're trying to work back to numbers of farmers, that's not actually a terribly helpful metric, because we know that current users are hedging in two ways. The first is that they're hedging by not irrigating all the irrigable land on their farm. This is entirely sensible and expected behaviour. And secondly, that they're initially contracting for maybe 70% of the optimum amount of water. So there's room for expansion on both those dimensions, expansion of water sales on the farms that are already contracted, as well as on additional farms. So it's not at all easy to give a crisp and precise answer to your question, even though it might seem like a really easy question to ask.
It would, however, if the scheme was purely supplying irrigation water for pasture, it'd irrigate about 22,000 hectares. If it was simply purely pastoral, I mean, from an economic efficiency point of view, that'd be great, but from an environmental and mixed land use and regional economic impacts, that would not be a great outcome, actually. So.
Just further on this, earlier today we were given a status comment relative to this, because there was a deliverable promise at one point. It says HBRIC is currently updating relevant land use numbers based on actual demand and forecast demand. As part of this, the McFarland commodity price forecasts are also being updated. This will enable the regional economic assessment to be readily refreshed. This will be provided to council at earliest opportunity following completion. So when will we get that? Where does that stand?
My understanding is council already has that document.
No, we don't have a final, we don't have the final.
No, you don't have
version
the final,
of
but-
the
but you-
McFarland analysis. So we've got so council, the inputs into that update are now available, but we haven't received the final version of that. So, but I would expect that to come back to you, possibly not in time for the E&S agenda, because the agenda goes out next week, but certainly at the next available meeting in March.
So just for clarification, is there anything that you are waiting on from us in order to undertake that regional economic analysis? No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
You won't be interested in the speculation, but there is a lot of speculation around who the investors are, potential investors are. I just wonder, what's your time frame for going to the public and telling them who the investor options are?
So, you know that there's an item on the agenda later that talks about this. The parties that we are engaged in discussion with have governance level meetings just like we do. We expect them to progress through that this week, and subject to approvals and all those kinds of things, then in a very short space of time, we will be in a position to say who the preferred investor is, but we are not at the present time.
Not to be unhelpful, but I suspect the cat is already out of the bag. That I've been advised that there's been conversations in Wellington, quite open, where people have said who the investor is.
We can only control the things that we are in control of, Councillor Barker.
Yeah, we're not, and I'm not aware of that.
I'm just telling you this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there was speculation in the newspaper here some time ago, which is unfounded. So let's not get worried about who's speculating about what. The gossip mill moves faster than the speed of light.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. And on and along
Undoubtedly faster.
along with similar vein with your design and construction, we've approved it in our minutes. They've been moved and seconded, but there's been some confusion around the fact that geotech work that was undertaken by some of my colleagues was actually the commencement of dam construction, which I think that's very, very wrong, and it's.
I wasn't aware that some of your colleagues had the ability to undertake geotechnical work. But
So, well, just can you please reconfirm, for the sake of some of the people in the room, that the early work that we provided extra funds for was to finalise the dam, design of the dam, and to maintain the critical path for the water delivery for 2019 to 2020.
yes, what you've just said is absolutely correct. It is not part of the construction. It is to inform the final detailed design of the dam.
Finances. Anything to add with the finances? Any further questions on finances? Councillor Belford.
I would, given where you are in the process now, I would assume you're making pretty heavy use of your financial advisors. Where in these numbers are the amounts we're paying for our financial advice on this? BNZ Partners, et cetera, et cetera?
You want to have a go at that, Andrew?
Oh, yes, I'm not going to answer that directly because the reality is we have a commercially confidential contract in place with the financial advisors.
So the numbers are here or
So
they're not here?
the numbers here reflect all of the services we're getting from all of our participants, including the technical engineer, whenever we've got environmental advice, or whether we're getting financial advice. Okay.
But they are included, Councillor Belford.
Absolutely.
Just to make an observation on your report, I meant to pick it up on the way through, water uptake. In regards to the water uptake work stream, I just wondered who the humorist was.
Further questions? Someone happy to move that we accept this report? We have a mover, thank you, Councillor Dick. We have a seconder, Councillor Hewitt. You wish to speak? You wish to speak, Councillor Hewitt?
Thanks, gentlemen, and I'd just like to acknowledge that we have two other directors in the room with Jim Scotland and Sam Robinson, so thank you to all of you for making your time today, and we look forward to ongoing progress.
Other speakers? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Pardon me? You're a no. Okay, thank you.